King, queen, king, queen. What is the king and what is the queen? If you're watching this video, you probably have no idea how this game works. Well, I got you. I'm Women's Grandmaster Dina Belenke, and this is Russian Chess School. In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to play chess. Before we start, for deep concentration and your inner ADHD, switch to full screen mode and focus. A game of chess. Where do we start? Straight from the rules. Let's go. This is a chessboard. Really? Yeah. We've got here 64 squares, 32 pieces, white and black, 2 players. Each side plays each color. These are ranks from 1 to 8 ranks and columns or files from A to H. How do we set up the pieces? This is how we set up the pieces. Make sure that your queen, this person here, right, this lady, is always on its own color. White queen on the white square, black queen on the black square. One more thing that Chess Hollywood usually fails to do is to put the rook on the right corner. White rook on your left is always gonna be on the dark square. Don't mess it up. Like they did in Harry Potter. Just kidding. How do pieces move? Well, in order to show you how pieces move, we're gonna do this. Sorry, that was a bit violent. We start with the simplest, the pawn. When the pawn is on its standing position, for white is on the 2nd, for black, it would be on the 7th rank. So, the pawn, when it's standing on its starting position, it can actually jump to 2 squares, or jump 1 square, like this, really. Other than that, it's always gonna push 1 move forward. Except for when it captures. A pawn is the only piece in the world of chess that can capture different from the way it moves. When the pawn captures, it does it diagonally. Also, 1 square, like this. Hop. Thank you. What is the value of a pawn? It's super important to understand which pieces are better or worse, which pieces to keep, which pieces to trade. A value of the pawn is 1. Here, take it. Next, we gonna do a knight.
How does the knight move?
That's a good question. Generally moves like an L, and sometimes in blitz games it can be very unpredictable.
A knight is worth 3 points. So basically, if you lose a knight, you need to gain back at least 3 pawns. This is equal. Now you see why it's important to know how much a pawn is worth? An only piece on the chessboard that jumps, literally, just like the horse. And it jumps in the letter of an L. 2 squares on the side and 1 forward. For instance, 1 on the side, 2 forward, 2, 3. And you can see that this is a shape of an L. And the knight can do that to any side. Let's see, forwards, 1, 2, 3. You see, L, reverse. And then the same, 1, 2, 3. And once again, 1, 2, 3. So essentially, if you look at the board, the knight is on the light square, but it's gonna jump on all dark squares around us. So now that we know how pawns move, we're gonna put the pawns on the way where knight can take them. Right here, here, also here, here, there, also there, up here, let's do here. Okay, so this is how the knight moves. I essentially put the knight on purpose into the most powerful place, the center. This is gonna be super important once you start making your own strategies. If I put the knight on the bottom, like let's say 1 square down, just a little bit further away from the center, this is the center. Then I move all the pawns down, and this is how the knight moves, right? All the squares here is where the knight jumps. Still fine, but check this out. If I put the knight here on e2, as we say, move all the pawns down, you can already see that the knight has exactly 2 squares less. Now if I put it even further down, we move these pawns, this is how the knight moves, but these guys also are out. So we only got 4 moves. Worst comes here. If I move the knight to this side, we only got 3 moves. And now if I put the knight in the corner, this is a disaster. Basically, your chess before you discovered this video. Now the knight can only have 2 squares. So this is a super important concept. You'll understand it later, but just remember, activity of pieces is important. Next, we go for the bishop. Let's go for a dark bishop. It's worth 3.5. Just kidding. It's only 3. But some grandmasters say it's 3.5. Who is better, a knight or a bishop? None. They're equal. Again, let's call it equal for now before you become an expert after joining my Russian chess school. But for now, they're equal. So a bishop can play diagonally, like this and like this. So all this way up and all this way down, but also all this way this side and that side. So a bishop is very strong piece. And now if I were to put the pawns on all the sides where the bishop moves, I wouldn't necessarily be able to. So I guess my editor will do that. Thank you, editor. All right, this is how bishop moves, and this is how bishop captures, like this. Note that unlike a knight, a bishop cannot jump over pieces. This is a pawn here, and this is a pawn here. Bishop cannot jump over there. Bishop can only go here and take this one. Although this would be a bad move, because the pawn... Actually, no. The pawns, unlike any other pieces, cannot go backwards. So let's say if you think the pawn could take the bishop, you'd be wrong. The pawn cannot, because it only goes up. By the way, what happens to the pawn when it goes up? It promotes. It promotes to any other piece except for a king, because your king is the most important and most valuable piece in the game. If you lose it, the game is over. So when a pawn promotes, it can become any piece. A bishop, a knight, a rook, and even, if only I could find the queen. Where is the queen? Oh, here is the queen. And the queen. Boom. Next on the line is the rook. Is worth 5 points. So we put the rook here. Ooh. How does the rook move? Up, down, left, and right. Not like this. Not like the bishop, but this. The rook can also not jump. So, for example, if the rook is here, it can capture this pawn, but it cannot capture the other pawn, right? One move at a time. Super important in chess. One side makes a move. What's next? We got the queen. The queen is the most powerful piece of them all. It's worth 9 points. Or 9 pawns. Or a bishop and a knight and another bishop. Oh, and by the way, bishops cannot stand on the same color. So black has 2 bishops, right? They cannot be both on the light squares. One bishop can only go on light squares, and another bishop can only go on dark squares. Except for, I guess, when you promote, and then you do the second bishop, and it becomes the second. Wow. Honestly, never happened in my game for my over 25 years of competitive play, but maybe for you it will. You could be the first one. After you play your first game on chess.com, you can use my affiliate link to upgrade your membership, but let's not talk about that right now. So, the queen. Here is the queen, but how does the queen move? The queen, ladies and gentlemen, moves like this and this. This is how the queen moves. Like a bishop and like a rook. Literally. So the queen moves left, right, up and down, but also diagonally. So let's have some fun. These are all the squares that this queen controls. Isn't that crazy? Okay, I literally will not have enough pieces to discover how this queen moves because, and just so this is the queen. This is how the queen works. Oh wait, I think I forgot something. The king, the most important piece. What's the value of a king? No, it's not 0. And no, it's not 10. It's the eternity. The whole world. King is priceless. It has no price because the moment you lose your king, also known as a checkmate, the game is lost. First of all, how does the king move? So the king is the easiest piece of them all. The king moves 1 square to any side. So here, there, diagonally, but also just near. Any square near the king is where the king moves. Same thing as for the knight, and basically for any piece. This is the power of the center. You should always put your pieces towards the center, because in the center, they control the most of the squares. Like imagine if you put the king all the way down here. It only controls 5 squares instead of 8. But if we move the king over there to the corner, it will only control 3 squares instead of 5. You see the difference. Now, what is the goal in chess? The goal is to checkmate the king, or basically capture as many your opponent's pieces as you can. Because that's gonna help you checkmate the king. Something like this. This is like, now I'm gonna explain you something very important. In order to checkmate your opponent's king, you need to put it under a check. A check is an attack of the king. Let's say this is a check to a white's king. The queen, as you remember, goes like a rook and a bishop. So now the king is attacked. Is it a checkmate? No. We cannot go here or there because the queen controls it. We can't go here because the queen will capture, but we can move up over here, g7, or here, h7. These two are possible moves for a white king. Therefore, it's only a check. It's dangerous, but no one died from a checkmate. We're gonna move up and the game will continue. But if we add the king, and by the way, none of the chess game can be happening without both king. I was just showing this for educational purposes. But of course, we get to have black's king. Let's put it somewhere there. Check or checkmate? Only a check. But now, if we put the king right here on g6, you'll notice that this king cannot go anywhere anymore because black's king, as you remember, controls all these squares, and believe it or not, but 2 kings cannot be close to each other. Why? Because then they would be putting one another into a check, which is illegal. And the game is over. This is a checkmate. So to do that, you probably need to capture your opponent's pieces. That's why you gotta play smart. But that I teach in my Russian chess school. All right, folks, so there is one more thing you need to know about the king. Sometimes beginners do this mistake, something like this. Black to move. This is a draw. Excuse me, Yeah, that's right. This is a draw. Black king has nowhere to go, but it is not attacked. If the king is not attacked and he has nowhere to go, it's a draw. It's a stalemate. Let's say the position was like this. Then it would not be a stalemate because even though the king cannot move, you still have a pawn. You have another soldier who can go up. One more move. Your favorite one. En croissant. Je rigole. En passant. Just kidding. En passant is the only move which looks like a glitch. Let's say your pawn is standing here and it's a starting position and the pawn jumps like this, as you usually know. But there is another pawn, your opponent's pawn, that is, remember, controlling these two squares. By the way, like the pawn here, let's see, cannot capture. That's a big difference. The pawn cannot capture a pawn which is in front of it. It can only move in front. But when there is a pawn, it is blocked. It cannot move. Not like the bishop, let's say, right? If you have two bishops and they're standing towards each other, they're not blocking each other. You can take. But a pawn, it's hard to explain the logic here, but just remember, a pawn cannot capture a pawn like this. A pawn can only capture diagonally. So when you jump with an e pawn to e4, I can shoo, 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 shoo. And this one disappears. Exactly. Stolen. Rigged. Now you know how to play chess. Go find your first prey and good luck. Oh, wait a second. I forgot. One more thing. Very, very important rule. Special rule. To show you this rule, I'm gonna put you a starting position. So now that you know how pieces move, I'm gonna show you one more rule that exists in a chess game. So we're gonna start the game with moving the pawn up, like this, 2 squares, because it's more aggressive. Take the center. Let's say our opponent replies with e5, putting the pawn on e5. We develop our knight towards the center, and attack the pawn, as you can see. They're gonna protect the pawn with knight c6. We're gonna develop our bishop and prepare the special rule. They're gonna develop their bishop as well. And now there is the rule, a castle. A castle is a super important thing that you need to do in the opening out of 3 things. Thing number 1, control the center. Thing number 2, develop your minor pieces. Thing number 3, put your king into a safe place. Castle. A castle is the only moment in a chess game where you have not 1, but 2 pieces playing at the same time. And your king, this one, is gonna jump 2 squares. What? Do what? Yeah, exactly. So this king and this rook are gonna swap places. The king is gonna jump 1 square. Always jumps 1 square over here on g1. And the rook is gonna stand right behind on f1. This is a castle. Now this is a short castle, but there is also a long castle. What's that? All right, let me show you. So we castled, let's say they continue the developments, knight f6. We're gonna go knight c3. We continue our opening. They go d6. Let's do something like d3. They're gonna go bishop g4. We're gonna go bishop g5. This is just an example, but it's an important example because here you see how all minor pieces, knights and bishops, these are minor pieces, are developed, and the center is controlled. And we're almost done with the opening. Like, for example, Queen's Gambit is an opening, as you might have heard, except for one thing. Black king hasn't castled. Basically, white is done with the opening, but not black. It's black to move, and here, instead of castling short, like this, king jumps and the rook goes right after, black can play queen to, let's say, d7. And essentially what this does is that it prepares a long castle. A long castle is the castle with a king to the other side, to the queen side. See, this is a king side if we divide the board in two, and this is a queen side. So a long castle is the castle with the king. Let's say we do something random like rook to e1 for white, and here black can jump one square to the other side, and the rook will stand just after it. And that's a long castle. The difference is that here you see there are two spots available. While if you try to go short castle, you will have only one spot available. So sometimes beginners do this mistake. They confuse and they do over here. But this is wrong because the king cannot jump two squares, right? The king can only jump one square. So just remember, the king on the white square, always one square, either left or right. There are a few things that you need to know about the castle. First of all, you can only castle, and this is something players who never played over the board, even though they are already experienced and have played online for so many years, but might not know, because when you're playing online, you cannot physically make illegal moves. But when you're playing over the board, you actually can. And by the way, if you already know how chess pieces move, but you're preparing for your first over the board tournament, you should absolutely mind this. So, the king, let's say if the knight wasn't here, it was somewhere there. Can black castle like this? The answer is no. Black cannot castle because this bishop over here controls this square. So the king cannot jump over a check like this. Illegal. Although if the position was like this and the bishop was controlling the diagonal through the castle, but not of the king, the castle would have been possible because it would only require a rook over here to jump over a check. And the rook can do that. It's not a problem. The rook cannot be under a check, unlike king. So, two more things you need to know. If the rook has already moved, let's say played on c8 and then turn back, you lose the right to castle this way. You can only castle shortly. If the king has already moved, let's say you move your king up and then back, you lose the right to castle. You can no longer castle.
Wait, is that all?
I guess that's it. Now, please go and win your first game and let me know in the comments how did that go. Want to learn more about chess strategies in the opening, middle game, and end game? I recommend you watching this video. If you're very passionate, go and check out my Russian Chess School, a training method for adult improvers where I take anyone from 0 to 2000. So, thank you for watching.